Okay. Alright, guys. How is everyone doing? So, due to the lack of reliable editing software and the like, I am going to be doing reviews in this sort of format. I wrote down notes this time because last time it was a clusterfuck, and I want to avoid that. So bear with me while I get set up a little bit, because I have been playing. Give me 1 sec. I gotta turn off the sound in this game. 1 second, guys. Let's see here. Sound, audio output, primary output part. Okay. Let's see here. Audio output. Devices, maybe. Audio devices. There we go. That should be better. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that. Oh my god, I wrote down some bullet points that I want to kind of talk about. So, I've been trying to kind of go through my video games that have been collecting dust, try to finish them up. You know, not necessarily complete them 100%. I did complete Horizon 100%, but that was just because I really enjoyed it. So I want to talk about what I want to start off with, kind of like my history with JRPGs and why. And for those of you that don't know, JRPG stands for Japanese role-playing game. That's typically like where Final Fantasy came from and the like. So I've been a gamer since I was, before I could walk. Essentially, I started with like Intellivision and Atari, and then I moved on to NES, and I've been playing every generation since. But I didn't start playing RPGs until the 16-bit era. I didn't play all the NES games I played were action-based games. There wasn't too many RPGs for NES as it was, and to me they were just a little bit complicated at that point. You know, I was like 5 at the time, so. But when the 16-bit hit, I still played action games until a close friend of mine recommended I play this game called Shining Force, and I was like, okay. So I played Shining Force 2, and I really enjoyed it. I found it really fun. Shining Force was not a JRPG in the sense of your classic turn-based style, which would be your Final Fantasies 1 through 10. But it was, a strategy-based one. But I found it really engaging. I was like, oh, this game is so long, and I'm not beating the game in one day, and this was great. And then after Shining Force, I ended up playing like Dungeons and Dragons, and then we started playing Dungeons and Dragons in real life, and then I went on to Breath of Fire for SNES, and then eventually I went back to the once I played Final Fantasy 2. Which was our American or Japanese 4. I fell in love with RPGs, fighting games and RPGs. That was, my that was all about. Excuse me. So I've been playing many of them. So we have back in PlayStation 1 was like a haven for RPGs. I mean, so many good ones came out for the PlayStation 1. One game that in particular that I played very little at the time, it was called Tales of Destiny, and I was like, wow, this is an RPG, but it's not. I'm not stuck in a menu. I can run around the battlefield, and I can, create. And it is very like Zelda-ish, and I was like, this is awesome. And that would come to be called an action RPG or a real battle RPG. Is what they call it. So Tales Destiny, and then Tales had a huge amount of games, but they weren't overly popular. For some reason, they kind of went under people's radar. because people were too focused on games like Final Fantasy to even realize they were there. I mean, there's a huge fan base for Tales, right? And Tales has probably just as many games as Final Fantasy, if not just as many, really close. So that's kind of like where I started with, where I've been, and then obviously anybody who knows me knows I played World of Warcraft for a long time, like 12 years. And MMOs were kind of like what I was all about. MMOs were perfect for me, actually, because it was an RPG that never ended. And to me, that was great. Because I don't really struggle with games. I can pretty much go through them and figure them out. I may not be like a king dominating them, but I can get through them easily enough and usually finish all the content. So, okay. So I want to talk about, that's kind of like what my history with them are. Okay. So the review today is going to be about Tales of Berseria. Now, initially I was a little wary about this game because it was a female protagonist. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's very rare that it's done well. One thing that I didn't like, just looking at the game's aesthetics, is the game, you could tell it was designed for the PlayStation 3, which isn't bad. It's very anime style graphics. Not like Final Fantasy is a little bit more detailed, more refined. As you can see, this is Final Fantasy X, and you can kind of see the character models and stuff. But in Berseria, it's very anime driven. So, with that being the case, these girls, the main character in this game is wearing like nothing. Like, I mean, she's practically naked, and I mean, that to me is, I don't know. I don't care to see the females in these games to be so scantily clad. Okay. So I don't really like that. Like, I don't like seeing the girls are, like half naked. I know that there's a section of the fan base that does like that. That's just not for me. But thankfully, this game has so many things you can do. You can change. A lot of optional content, which is fun for me. All the DLC was all cosmetic, which I'm totally fine with. So you play as a character named Velvet. She trains under a gentleman named Arthur. I'm trying not to spoil the story in case anybody plays it. Something happens. She goes through a tragedy. She becomes a demon. And she's out for revenge. Somebody close to her dies. And the whole game is just her getting just mad and angry, and she like will kill everything she can find. She has a demon arm that she uses to eat other demons. Just a really deep, and this is the one game I've played that I can honestly say had too much story. Like, oh my god, there's so much narrative. It's great writing, but there's a lot of it, like a fucking lot. It's like you go through the story dialogue, and then you're walking, and then your characters will interact with each other, and they'll like see something that reminds them of something, so they'll talk to each other about it. Then you have to go through that, and then it's like 4 or 5 of those in a row, and then you go back into more story, and then and it's constantly just talking. That I was at first, for the first like 20 hours, I'm like, that's awesome. Like, there's a lot of interaction and but once you get past 20 hours, you're just like, okay. And I'm not even gonna lie, I started skipping some of these conversations. I would look at the title of the conversation, because it tells you, it says that, it's like you can activate this conversation, and it shows the title, and I'm like, okay. I would read the title, I was like, I know what they're gonna say, and it's just a lot of story. I mean, god damn, there's so much story. To me, like, it was just overdone with the story. That's good and bad. But I'm a completionist, so I did every side quest. I explored every area. I tried to you know, and I'll go into the mechanics of the game in a minute, but the story progresses. It's both voice acted and text. And the voice acting is great. Like, all the characters' voices are great. The tones are great. You know, and I can say right now, without a doubt, that Bandai is killing it in the RPG world right now. Killing it. Square, it has a lot to do right now. You know, Square's making like the 5th update to Final Fantasy 15. Bandai's sitting here releasing Ni no Kuni 2, and then they released, you know, and they're releasing another Tales game next year for the Switch, and like, Bandai is killing it. They got Dragon Ball Z out right now, and it's killing sales still. Like, no joke, when Broly was released, every single server was at capacity. Like, their DLC is flying off the handle. Like, Bandai is killing it right now. Fucking dominating. Like, oh my god, just like killing the... Yeah, I know Square's in the middle of hiring for different projects. Namely, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of them. So anyway, so you go through the story of this. It starts off with a story of revenge, and then it molds, and it shows Velvet go through all these transitions where she's, you know, she doesn't want anything to do with anybody. She just wants to kill this guy, and then that shifts on to something else, into something else, into something else, and by the end of the game, like, she goes from this evil, demented demon to this anti-hero, and it was just done so well. By the end of the game, I was like, wow, this is really great. Like, the way it happened. And there was a lot of really, really sad moments. I mean, that game is full of just like those... Like, if you've played Final Fantasy VII, the feeling you get when Aeris dies, it's like that, like, all over this game. There's so many moments that are just like, this happens, and it's like, oh my god, I can't believe that's happening, and that's happening, and that's happening. And everybody that she eats, like, she has when she goes to sleep, she sees them in her dream, and it's like, just a really, really awesome. Like, the writers for this game did such a good job. I wish that they didn't have her dressed up like such a whore, but other than that, like, it was awesome. Pat, that is like 20-year-old news. Literally, if you Google Final Fantasy VII, you'll see 8 different pictures of it. So, you know, it was just like so good. Yeah, I know, you're just kidding. You've been at our house enough times to watch me and Mark play it, so. So, okay, so we talked about the story progression, which I again love. This character development is really good. So there's something I want to talk about, character development, that it's something small, but it's like something small to like, it's really impressive. Like, okay, so most games, you know, after the battle, they do like some like winning stance or whatever. In this game, there's multiple different things that can happen after the battle's over, right? Like, it's just like Star Wars, like if you destroy the enemy, they have some remark about them being weak. If you barely beat them, or the battle's long, you'll have a remark about barely getting through it or whatever. But there are some times where the characters will, 2 characters or 3 characters will talk to each other about stuff. Like, you have this, there's this one character in the game, and he has this curse where he always has bad luck. Anytime anything can go bad, it will go bad with this guy. So they're like, you know, he's like, oh, I wish I had your powers, and, you know, Velvet's like, trust me, you don't want to be this, and da-da-da. And it was just like a really cool touch to me that there was multiple different conversations that could happen after the battle. It's like something small, but it was something that was, I never saw something like that before. Like, you know, in games like Legend of Legaia or whatever, the character would say a phrase or something, or do like in Final Fantasy the same way, like they do a stance or whatever. But in this game, they talk to each other, interact after the battle, and they'll talk about the battle. You know, like, I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like, and I'm sure it's not the first game to do it, but it was like really cool little thing for me. Like, oh, that's awesome. So the character development is great. All the characters, they start off one way, and by the end of the game, they're they've either matured or they've changed their motives or whatever. And by the end of the game, it's a completely different situation. The ending was really solid. I felt like it closed all the plot holes, which is something more than I can say. Like if you've ever finished Final Fantasy VIII, that ending is crap. It makes no sense. Nothing gets answered. There's no resolution. It makes no sense. Final Fantasy VIII has like one of the worst endings I've ever seen. Yeah. This game, I liked it that the main character wasn't a silent protagonist. And that's something that has been a very common theme, especially in games like in the Breath of Fire series, where the hero is usually pretty quiet. But I felt like the ending was good. Like it made sense. It was concise. It closed all the holes. And Tales of Berseria is a prequel storyline wise to another Tales game. One of the worst in the series from what I hear. I haven't played it. I can't really say yes or no. Okay, so now we're gonna talk. I want to talk about. So we tackled progression. We tackled development. I want to talk about ATB, which is active time battle versus action RPG style. So, this is a probably unpopular opinion, but I feel like turn-based games don't really. Like, it's super simple to make the right decision in a Final Fantasy game. Like, honestly, it's not hard. If you're fighting a monster, you buff all your characters. Like, let's take Final Fantasy 6, right? Because that's a common one. Final Fantasy 6 is super simple. It's like, okay, go to your espers, pick your buff spells, buff your party, use to get the three that you want, buff them, try to debuff the opponent, and then just start doing your most powerful attacks. That's it. And then a big attack's coming, you defend or you put barriers up. That's it. It's not complicated. It's not hard. All it incentivizes is level building. Like, you go out and you level build, and that's it. Right? It's like level build as much as you can, get super powerful, and then you can withstand all their attacks. It doesn't matter. Final Fantasy VII is really, 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 really bad about that. Like, once you out level the stuff, it doesn't even matter what you press. You could use the worst characters in the game and you'd be totally fine. 8 is the same. 8's the same way. 8 is really bad. In Final Fantasy VIII, once you can junction haste into your weapon, it's over. The opponent will never go again. It's boring. There's no reason to get the most powerful weapons. There's no reason to get better equipment. Once you can junction haste, it's over. Done. Hell, when 8 first came out, I was max level in the first area of the game. So, it's not. They're like turn-based is. I've played so many of them that they're basic. I mean, and it's because it's a basic system. It was a answer to a question back in the 80s. So that was a necessary thing to have. But now, like, okay, so in Berseria, right, it's action based. So you move around on a battlefield. It's very fast paced. There's tons of things to go on. You have to think about different things. So you get different attacks called arts, and each art will affect different monsters differently. So, like, the monster type is flying. This attack does more damage to flying monsters, less damage to armored monsters. So you have to think about your ability setups. You get like 25 different arts. So you have to think about your combos and how you're going to set them up. And then you have these souls that you have to keep track of. And then you can put her into demon form. But when you put her into demon form, she constantly gets her health drained. So you have to consider all these different variables. So the battles for me were more fun because they were more engaging and to think more. And there's a difficulty setting. So, like, if you're just not into that stuff, or you're not as good, you can still go through it and put it on simple, and then every attack does the same amount of damage to every enemy. So you can make it easy if you want, but you can make it harder later on too. So that was something I was like, yeah, that's That's awesome. Like that's something that drew me in about Tales, because I played Tales of Destiny before I played Star Ocean. And Star Ocean has a very similar setup to Tales, not quite as fast, but right there. So I feel like there's good sides to both, right? So you have ATB can be good, action can be good, but it has to be done right. Final Fantasy 15 is done wrong. Their battle system is insanely easy. All you need to do in 15, hold square, wait for the counter to appear, hit the counter, stagger the opponent, mash circle, hold square again, block, counter, hold circle. That's literally the whole thing. Like, I can tell you right now, I'm level 40 something in 15, and I have not cast magic once. I've never needed to. It's very simple. So to me, that's action done wrong. And I've been a big fan of the action style since Star Ocean 2 and Star Ocean 3 and so on and so forth. So let's see. So the big difference for me about when you take the Tales series versus the Final Fantasy series is Final Fantasy story is extremely predictable. If you've played more than, I would say, 3 of them, you can pretty much, halfway through the game, you can pretty much tell what's going to happen. Like, it's super basic. The story is, like, extremely predictable. Like, I know the ending to 15 because of how predictable the story is. There's nothing special, there's nothing secret, there's nothing amazing. It's very, I guess the word's expected. Like, oh, okay. It's either, with Final Fantasy, they either overcomplicate it, like 8 and 7, or they make it super predictable, like 5 and 6. Take what you can get. But I will tell you, Final Fantasy Tactics has one of the best stories ever written in an RPG. Hands down. One of the best stories ever written. Yeah, no, I get that, Pat. Like, I understand what you're trying to say, but they're both good. I'm not saying, because like, my next one is gonna be 10. I'm gonna go through 10 and do everything in it, because I haven't done the international version, which is the port that came to PS4, because there's extra bosses and stuff, and I haven't completed 10 since PS2 era. So like active, or ATB is fine. It's okay. It's turn-based is fine, but once you in the Final Fantasy universe, it's very basic. It's like, you don't have to think that hard. Not really. I'd like to see them make another Final Fantasy game that was turn-based. Yeah, this is the 10 remaster. Mainly because I'm trading in the 3 games that I beat this month tomorrow at GameStop, so I got them packed up already. Okay, so last thing I want to touch on is the post-game stuff. Every good RPG has tons of things to do at the end of the game. Now, before, back in the 90s, yeah, that's optional though. Every Final Fantasy has that. You should like it. It's just like the game in Harry Potter. It's just like that game in Harry Potter. Marcy even talks about it. So, anyway, talk about post-game stuff. So back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of RPGs would have the hard dungeons would be right before the end of the game. Like, you get to the end of the game, and then you can go do the dungeons, all the rest, and then you finish the game. They stopped that in the PS1 era. So a lot of times when you in a games like 10 is like that. Excuse me. 10's like that. 12 is like that. There's a lot of excuse me. At 15 is like that too. So you finish the game, then you save, and then you can go and do these optional dungeons, which are typically much harder than much harder than the last dungeon or whatever. Yada yada yada. So, Berseria had a kind of a weak endgame, but they did have New Game Plus. So, take the good with the bad. So, if you wanted to play the game again on a harder difficulty, you can do that, and you get a score based on how well you did. And you can unlock things, like you can get like double experience points, you can carry over all the abilities you learned, or da-da-da-da. Not the greatest post-game content, but the main game was so good that it wasn't really that big a deal. It's not a very hard game to get a platinum on, like a platinum trophy. I didn't, but I could do it. It's just not something I wanted to do. No, I haven't. Like I said, I have a huge monstrous list of the games I still have to plow through before I even think about anything new. And I pre-ordered God of War, so I'm gonna have that to deal with on the 20th. So, so yeah, overall, I give it a solid 8 out of 10. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's something that I would want to play again, but it was definitely worth playing. And it was, I mean, I bought the game for like $15 or something. It was really cheap. You know, I got it on sale. It's a solid buy for sure. So I highly recommend it. No, you don't need to play Chrysalis again. You need to get out of this 8-bit and start playing real games. That's what you need to do. We're not in the 80s anymore, Pat. Give it up. So, alright, so that is my thoughts on Tales of Berseria, and I'm going to... I did finish Evil Within 2, and that was a lot of fun, too. But I mean, it's just your average survival horror game. I enjoyed it a lot more than I've enjoyed any Resident Evils in a while, too. So I don't want to do a full review for it, but yeah, Evil Within 2 was a lot of fun. Pretty gross at the end too, like really disgusting. Really good narrative though. So, like Bandai right now is killing it. I mean, they're doing and Bethesda too. They're both those companies right now are dominating. I believe I'm going to finish 10, and then I'm probably going to shoot over and work on Monster Hunter World. They just released some new monsters, and update went live today for it. Yeah, you do that. So, alright, man. But I'm out, and I will upload this to YouTube so you can catch the beginning of what I thought. So, alright guys, I'll talk to you later. Thanks.